What up, Midgard? My name's Daniel Cumming. Welcome to the first Rune Yoga Embodying Magic podcast. I've had the idea of starting this podcast since I began a couple of years ago running Introduction to Runes workshops. And since recently starting to make Facebook live videos and things like that, I started to realize pretty quickly that when I intend to talk for about 5 minutes on a subject, it could easily turn into 30 or 40 minutes. Or for the people who joined one of my first workshops, it's intended to be about a 3-hour workshop, you might be with me for about 5 hours. So I thought I would start this podcast so that I can just set up the microphone, have a particular subject in mind, and then if I do go off on tangents, which will likely happen, it's a better space for it. So I wanted to build it around this idea of embodying magic and really start to focus in on what I'm doing and what other people are doing around yoga in general, but more so in how we get our body and our mind into a state of consciousness that makes us capable of these amazing magical qualities. And we're all trying to do the same thing in essence, but there's different paths that you can go down to do this. And there's some really cool people doing some really cool things. And I just wanted to talk about my experiences with things like this from people that I've learnt from, teachers, mentors, my own experience and what I'm working on at the moment. So really starting off with the idea of yoga, but specifically people who are really taking it to the next level, or I suppose taking it back to what it was originally intended for. So yes, yoga is for longevity and health, but it was originally as well to prepare your body for meditation. So to get out of that chattery mindset that, if anyone's tried to do meditation, it's kind of tricky, especially if you've got a lot on your mind or your body's holding a lot of tension, or, you just feel a bit stressed out. It's hard to just sit there and drop into that space. So what you can do is find certain techniques, and this one's like repetitious movement to get yourself into trance states, stretching, anything that, gets you out of your, chattery mind and drops you into your body a bit more, that whole idea of mindfulness, of being in the moment. And then that can lead to altered states of consciousness, and that's what I really want to focus in on. That idea of the quantum field that Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about, the void that Michael Kelly talks about, or Gununga Gap in Norse mythology that Edward Thorson talks about. And once you're there, talking about what we can do there, or what we can do in that state of consciousness. So I'm going to be talking about what I've experienced so far in my journey, techniques that I've learned from, teachers that I've learned from, specifically around the runes. I'll mainly be talking about because it's the major paradigm I operate within. And I'll also be getting other people who have developed really, really cool systems, or really unique ways, or just really, practical ways of doing things. And that's, for me anyway, the practicality of it is really important, because when it comes to doing anything, of what we call spiritual, if we can't bring that idea, that concept into our day-to-day lives, I mean, what good is it? A lot of the times people delve into spirituality, especially get into the meditation aspect, or, journeying or things like that, and they can live in a bit of a fantasy world, which is good in its own. We all love to have our own fantasy world. It's fun. It makes life very interesting. But like, how do we bring that back to our day-to-day world, and how can we share that with other people? So I'd like to come back to the start and explore what the idea of magic is. Now, I mean, some people spell it with, Magic. Some people have added a K on the end. I've seen it spelt Majik. So I think because it's a word that has a lot of different ideas about it, and how we've got stage magic and cards and things like that. So some people use that magic, the word magic, for that, and the idea of, magic is with like spells and things like that has been lost. So they're trying to, some people have tried to change the spelling out of it, or even change the word in general. It's the first word for this idea, this concept, which I'm about to talk about, that I came across, and it initially sparked. It's like, what is this magic? What the hell is magic? And it's just something that I've grown to really like enjoy and love, and I really want to use this word and I suppose explain my idea of it. So I think one of the best ways to do that is just to take a little excerpt out of my my new book, How to Read Runes, plus do a little bit of a plug at the same time. But that I think that I've simplified as much as I can my idea of what it is. So what comes to mind when I say the word magic? A white-bearded elderly man with a pointed hat waving a wand around while objects fly around the room? What about a pointy-nosed woman huddled over a bubbling cauldron, cackling with a pentagram-like symbol hanging over the wall? Maybe fairies fluttering around a beautiful enchanted forest. Perhaps you envision a charismatic suited gentleman keeping your gaze and asking you questions as he makes your chosen card disappear and reappear in your pocket. None of these would be too off the mark, the reason being that the word magic is a vague description of an obscure concept, often used to describe something that cannot be easily understood. Magic can be described as the science and art of consciously reshaping your inner and outer world in accordance with your will. It is the process of internalizing a symbolic form of meta-communication, integrating this system into your psyche in a practical way that can be used to create a communicative feedback loop between your conscious mind, your subconscious or unconscious, and the universe/multiverse you operate within. It's adding tangibility to the intangible, image to the imageless, grip to something that we slip through our fingers like water every time we attempted to grasp its mystery. Magic and the runes as a magical system gives us a way to interact with this strange human ability of self-transformation. So, essentially, it's being able to use our consciousness to go against nature. So, in my opinion, there's no white or black magic. So, I mean, if you think about it, all true magic, in my point of view anyway, and it's just my point of view, is essentially black magic because you're going against nature. If you're going with nature and you're doing white magic, you're essentially not doing anything. Okay, so you might, do a little chant, you might say certain things, but if nothing changes, then you're not doing anything. Okay, so black magic is the idea, or magic in general, is the idea of saying something, so doing your spell, doing whatever technique you use, and having something happen that, had you not done whatever you did in this magical process, wouldn't have happened. So you can see it as changing your own subconscious. So Michael Kelly has a really good book called Everything and Nothing. A word of warning though, it can really destroy your whole point of view on life and spirituality in general. So I probably just, see how you go reading it. Take it slowly if you do. It's an amazing book. But he has a section in there called Runes for Skeptics. And he posits the idea that even if you had no belief in anything supernatural, that runes would still work, because you're internalizing a symbol system, and then your subconscious mind, the thing that runs everything. I like to think of your conscious mind as like the rider, the person riding the horse, and then your unconscious or subconscious mind as like the horse that is actually taking you places, right? Or the vehicle. And you can, direct the horse all you want, but if you keep falling asleep and the horse isn't trained well, or it doesn't want to go where you've told it to go, it's just going to go off and start eating the grass, or go off somewhere else, or it might even buck you off completely and leave you behind. So the subconscious, I like to think of it as like a child. So it wants to do what you ask, but it also wants to play. So you have to give it stuff to play with. You have to repetition. You have to really repeat the process of learning things so your body can integrate it. But it has to be interesting for your subconscious. Otherwise, it's just going to go back to what it was always doing. So Michael Kelly's talking about the idea of your subconscious or unconscious absorbing these this symbolic set, and then associating this symbolic set with your outside world and your inner world, and then changing things in accordance with this paradigm that you've created for yourself for what you can and can't do. That's all the paradigm is, right? It's rules to the game. It's a way of operating. There's a lens that we can see the world in, and it's a game that we create. So we have a game that there's another book called The Master Game, which is an amazing book about talking about the games that people play, and that's all we do. We have set goals. So we have either the money game, where our main goal in life is to obtain a car, a house, all this sort of stuff. Or people want fame, or people want spiritual enlightenment, or people want certain things, and then we basically are told the rules, or we adopt the rules, or whatever. We make up the rules along the way, mostly of what people have said, what the rules are, and then we play along with those rules in order to achieve what we want out of the game. So changing your paradigm is a long process, especially that we've grown up within a certain way of seeing and thinking and understanding the world. A lot of that is based on, especially in the Western world, based on a Christian worldview of things. So even though you may not, have a Christian mindset or practice Christianity or Catholicism or any of the like, often we just have those set of ideals or that way of operating ingrained in us. And so the act of magic is not just, making stuff happen, but true magic is really just starting to delve down through these layers of ideas of how we see the world that we've accumulated throughout our life, and really just shedding layer after layer after layer, and just trying to figure out who we really are underneath it all, and what we really want out of life, and if these ideals of how we see the world are really still relevant, and if they're acting positively for us or negatively for us. So that can be a whole process, and that's what I like to call the third type of magic that you do. So in the way that I look at it, there's three types of magic. So again, I'll come back to the book and explain that the three types of magic, that the way that I see it. So there's divination, sorcery, and initiation. Now, I'll read from the book. So divination, simply put, it's a way of asking questions. So it's a form of inquiry directed to your own self or the webwork of the universe, depending on your point of view. So a direct question or inquiry is posed, and the answer is received through the medium of the runes in a decided interpretive method. So the mechanics and causality of the answer is a separate topic altogether, and really not important at this stage. The important thing is that you have a decisive method of asking questions, receiving and interpreting answers in a way that gives you fresh insight outside your everyday perspective. So divination is, for example, the tarot is the main thing that most people know. You lay out a set of cards, you ask a question, and you get a reading, and it means a certain thing. You can do the same thing with the runes. I mean, in my own point of view, and in Michael Kelly from the book I mentioned before, Everything and Nothing, essentially you can do it with anything. You could get a normal pack of cards, like heck, you do it with the alphabet. What you're doing is giving meaning to a particular symbol set. And then when you ask a question or you have a general inquiry, when that symbol set comes out in a certain pattern, you'll interpret it in a certain way that might give you insight outside of your conscious perspective, because it appeals to your subconscious a little bit more. Because imagery it appeals to our subconscious a lot more than conscious language and things like that, because it makes us think too much. Once we start talking English, where things are ticking over, what's that word mean? How do they mean it? All these, connotations to it. Whereas symbols, they bypass that part of the brain a little bit more, and allow us to just feel things a little bit more. They're more connected with our intuition. a bit more, I find. And yeah, so with the runes in particular, I like to think of all this as like installing software. So in the Elder Futhark, the main set of runes, there's 24 runes. So if you install the 24 different concepts, that when you get a reading, you can interpret that in whatever that way that comes out as the reading, and then you can interpret an answer that might give you insight outside of your usual perspective. Now, you can look at it as it's purely psychological, and no matter what comes out, you're just going to interpret a meaning and you'll get something out of it, right? Or you can see it as that when the runes come out, there's some divine intervention, and then the runes come out, and yeah, magic. They're always going to come out in the right way because, yeah, magic. So I'm undecided as to how magic, divination, all this stuff works. Okay, so I've come from a very, very skeptical background. I didn't believe in any of this kind of stuff before. I was basically atheist. Some weird stuff happened, probably starting about 8 or 9 years ago, that set me on a bit of a journey. I'll be talking about it in other podcasts specifically for that. I'm also writing a book about it this year, all my experiences in this aspect. But to cut it short, my skeptical boundaries have gradually been broken down. But I still, even though spirituality, it's a very subjective thing, it's, often what we experience is unique to us, I think it's still really important that we try to rationalize it at least a little bit, and even try to explain it to others, because there's that risk of just like going nuts, going mad, and just, thinking we're, the super enlightened being, and just basically like self-delusion, ideas of grandeur, and yeah, it goes all different ways. Some people just go nuts and end up in, huddled in a corner, rocking side to side. Some people go the opposite way, and they think they're, connected to God, or connected to, some God or spiritual entity, and think they're, the king of the world. So you've really got to bring yourself back down to reality, a bit of grounding, and see how this, like I mentioned at the start, how this can be applied to your day-to-day life, and even how you would communicate this kind of thing to other people. Because with runes and magic in general, it's, it's an intangible concept, meaning we can't really, can't hold it and be like, here, this is what it is, feel it, touch it, look at it, hear it. It's something outside of our 5 senses. And so all we can really do is say, what it feels like, kind of like ideas we get when we experience this concept or think about this concept. We write poetry about it, we write riddles about it. And that's where art comes into spirituality massively, because it's not tangible. What we can try to do is bring art into explaining these experiences. And art is something else that, it's very, very human, and like our magical ability as humans is to create art, like, artificial, the idea to create something that doesn't occur in nature. And that's essentially magic, right? What I said was, magic is the science of art of doing something that, had you not done that process, would never have occurred. So whatever your art is, you're creating something in the world, whether it's permanent or temporary, for other people to experience. And that's the key, I think, for other people to experience. And when it comes to changing the fabric of reality, which we'll go into next, it's important that you take other people into account, because essentially we're all in this together, and we have this collective idea of reality. In the book Sapiens, he talks about, the evolution of humankind, and one thing he talks about is that humankind have created this amazing communal ability to create fiction, and to create a collective fiction that brings people together. So any more than, like couple of hundred people, it's just going to be chaos unless they've got some sort of structure or some sort of story around why they collaborate, or why they are, together. Because, if you essentially think that, life is what you make of it, which is a completely different topic, but we create this idea of what we want to achieve out of life, what is important out of life, and we share that with other people, and that turns into things like spirituality and religion, and we're not going to discuss what is real as far as like gods, spirits, all that sort of stuff in this. That's a huge other topic. But essentially it's this ability to share fiction with other people that changes the way we view the world. Because if we, tell people, this is kind of what the world is, and then they tell someone else, and then it changes depending on how they view it, and we all have this collective view of what the world is, it changes how we all act in the world. So that brings me to the next system of magic. Well, it's all from the same system, I guess, but the next act of magic, which would be sorcery. It's just another cool word for it. You can call it whatever you want. But this can be seen as the direct contrast to divination. So here you're making a statement, telling the world or yourself what you desire and speaking it into existence. So in operative rune work, we are carving our will and desires for change into our own psyche and the very fabric of the world. So this can be done in many different ways with runes, such as physically carving them into objects suitable for the purpose of the intended working, or simply drawn into the air and imagine being carved into the world with the sufficient concentration and execution. So in any act of sorcery, there is a defined and observable effect we desire to happen. The goal is change. So sorcery is essentially, if divination is asking questions, so like, I'm not sure about this, lay the cards out, find out. You could use those same runes. So say you do a reading and you have, you ask question, okay, I'm not sure what I want to do with my job. I actually did a reading with someone yesterday and she's thinking, do I go the usual day-to-day route and, where the stable, safe money is? Or do I follow basically what I want to do with my own art and, forgo the initial safe money, but really put all my all into the art? And so, things came up around the rune Tiwaz, which is really like your own kind of what you feel to be true. When you just know something is right, you know something is true, you've, thought about it all before, and then you've like bypassed all that, over-analyzing, you just feel into it and it's true. So it's kind of that concept, being true to yourself, loyalty and stuff like that. And the idea of Ansuz being the rune of communication, and the idea of inspiration being able to be communicated eloquently. So, for example, you could see these runes in a reading and go, okay, well, this is what's going on. These are the elements that are in play. But then you can flip that and be like, okay, well, Ansuz is like out of balance. So how's it out of balance? You could say that, you're not, you had that inspiration, but you're not channeling that inspiration anywhere. You're not eloquently turning that into some sort of art. So you might get Kanars or something like that rune, and that idea of being able to like bring that down into you, like taking your skills or having the skill to bring it down into manifestation, making it real, like doing something with that inspiration instead of just letting it, float around and burn out and fizzle out. So you could, anchor those concepts into the runes, and then you could create some sort of spell. The idea of spelling, right? Like to actually make something into existence. Because if you think of how language would have evolved, when you say something to someone, you, I suppose, initially wouldn't be just making general conversation. You'd be like, oh yeah, how was your day? Oh, my day is good. It's kind of pointless conversation. That wouldn't be the first things that we created language for. It would be if you wanted something. So you would say, lion over there, move, get out of the way. Or you'd say, give me food, or, you'd want something to happen. And that's a lot of the cases as well. When we talk to someone, when we say something, essentially we're expecting something to happen. And that's why the idea of persuasion and things like NLP and things they call lesser magic in certain circles is, magic can be seen on doing, making change on yourself or making change on the outside world, depending on which way you view it. But it is, affecting others. So to affect the outside world, we do need to affect other people and change people's perspectives on things. So by speaking something into existence, especially that other people hear, it can change their point of view, which can send a ripple effect and eventually make change on the outside world as well. But first, I think it's really important to change ourselves and how we operate. So a lot of stuff, when I first started doing all this stuff, I just like, I want to do, do things to affect the outside world. I've got to change this, I want this, grab this. But now I'm more so involved in changing myself and how I view the world, and I find that things click into place and I get things I want anyway by changing how I operate. Which brings me to the third type of magic, which is, you could call it initiation. So in a way, I'm reading for the book again. So in a way, this is a combination of both of these previous methods, but with the ultimate goal being growth and transformation of the soul. It is the lifelong journey and work of connecting with your higher self, rearranging your habits, life, and environment in accordance with your own higher purpose, whatever that is perceived to be. So it is in this third state of magic that a tried, tested, and complete system of self-development is most important. And this will provide the framework and tools you'll use in this epic venture. So in rune work, this is learning soul lore, perspectives on reincarnation and immortality, and it's the ultimate quest to question what our world is, our place in it, and our potential to develop ourselves. Now, when I started initially getting into this whole process of magic, or this concept of initiation and self-development, the first author that really changed my whole point of view on the world was a man by the name of Stephen E. Flowers. So Stephen Flowers, and he's an academic, and he really appealed to me because he has got a PhD, and he felt a little bit more grounded. He's talking about the history of how magic and all that sort of stuff happened, and he appealed to my skeptic view on the world, and he really opened me up to different ideas. And he has a different pen name that he uses when he focuses on the rune stuff that he writes, and that's Edred Thorson. So he founded a school, runic school, or magical school, you could call it, called the Rune Gild. And these days, that's the main school that I work within and I'm part of. And I'd really like to introduce other people to their concepts and ideas, because I think they're amazing. They're very grounded, they're very practical, and through meeting, you could see that the quality of a school is only really shown by the quality of its students or the people involved, and it's just really amazing people, but good peeps, and they've really helped me to develop myself and have a kind of, because I like to take everything, that whole concept, take with a grain of salt. I take things seriously, but I also, have a sense of humor about things, that if I want to change my point of view, or, I don't like getting too fanatical about ideas, because you end up blind within that idea, the idea of stepping outside of a paradigm. Their body of work really appealed to me, and their point of view on things, it really appeals to me. But Edred talks about the concept of runa, which is the idea of, it's that idea of mystery that, pulls us on. It's that feeling that, you look up at the stars and wonder what's going on, what the world is. It's that thing that sparks us, that thing that draws us on. It's like the original rune that sparked the other runes. It's like that original idea. And it's that concept of drawing us ever onward towards, the next mystery. And so an example is that, it's like that mirage over the horizon we're moving towards, but then we get over those hills and then it's moved further away. Now, a lot of people would see that as depressing. You're chasing a concept or a mirage that, not only isn't exactly what you think it's going to be, but you never reach it. But it's there's that old adage of, it's all about the journey, not the destination. And it really is about just something, some sort of desire, some sort of pulling onward, and all you need is just some direction to get moving, because a lot of people just stay put. Some direction to get you moving, and then everything you learn and develop along the way is going to change what you want and desire out of life and how you approach it. And it's that idea that we're never going to figure it out, right? So it's I love quantum physics and the idea, work of Joe Dispenza, and So like even in quantum mechanics, like we're trying to, scientifically understand the cosmos and everything, which is good. I mean, I think that's a really good way to approach things because, in science, we're ready to be wrong at any time and change our point of view and develop and evolve. And I think it's a really good way to look at things. But what they're realizing, and I'm realizing, is that consciousness is too much of a variable. So, we can start to understand maybe the mechanical natural universe a bit more because it's predictable. But consciousness changes all the time. As soon as you start to understand a consciousness, your own consciousness, it changes. You might be like, oh, I fully understand you. You'd be like, oh, actually, no. Now I'm going to change the way I behave and change who I am just to prove you wrong. Consciousness is always changing and evolving. So it's hard to put a formula on consciousness when it's too much of a variable. You can think of, like consciousness is a variable and, the natural world is more of a constant. And we're influencing that constant and changing it bit by bit. But we can't, the way that consciousness changes, it can change so quickly. The natural world kind of has to catch up, and that's the idea of magic, kind of weaving in your ideas, and then the natural world has to kind of catch up a little bit, or other people. But yeah, so it's, a depressing concept that some people would look at it like that you're never really going to figure out the universe, so why bother? It's just because it's fun, to try to unravel the mystery of the universe and what's going on. But it's how you view it. And like in for example, the, Catholic or Christian paradigm, the soul is like immortal but completely separate from the physical body. I just don't like, because we're belittling the physical. And that's really integrated into a lot of people view even spirituality these days, thinking that, you've got to separate from the physical world. But you've got to see how these people, how they were living, developing those concepts as well. If you think about it, everything is man-made. Some people might not think it's man-made, but anyway, that's another conversation. But you see how they live, like even in like things like Taoism, and you see there was a lot of poverty, and when Christianity was around, there's a lot of poverty, and they would have viewed the physical world as this horrible place to be, that they want to escape it. So that would have developed that whole paradigm that the physical is all punishment, and then we just need to escape the physical body and go to nirvana or go to heaven, or all these concepts. Whereas I think that's really only half the journey. The idea of gaining some sort of higher perspective on things, but then bringing that perspective back down to earth. And I like the Germanic point of view on the soul, especially around the idea, the Rune Gild's idea and Edred's idea of the soul that has multiple parts, and each part has its role in our multiple lifetime. They believe in there's this concept of reincarnation, that our soul is constantly being reincarnated, and parts of the soul can take on like ancestral memories. There's a part of the soul that's kind of connected to, but kind of different. It's this kind of like guardian angel like entity that is protective of you, but is also there to kind of mess with you and help you develop. And especially if you want to like do heroic things, it's gonna like put you into testful situations. Like I'm writing a whole book this year about this concept, and so there's a whole soul law, and there's a part of your soul that kind of makes your physical body. So don't see as like your soul just inhabiting like a random physical body. It kind of inhabits a physical body, but they also believe that the way that your physical body evolves and changes is because of your soul. Like it's all integrated. So I won't go into soul law now. It's a very complicated subject and something that I'm really just scratching the surface on. It's a huge subject I really want to start to delve into more. But yeah, that's why I say embodying magic and not separating that idea of consciousness and the soul from the physical body, and seeing it as a separate entity, and seeing physical world as punishment. Like this is a beautiful playground, and we have a great opportunity to like be here and to shape ourselves and to enjoy it and to help others and help change the world as well. And that's where magic comes into it. And it's this, I like to think of, I love the idea of the Matrix. I think it's amazing, the movies, the concept. And I like to think of the runes as kind of like the code of the Matrix. The runes are like the underlying code of what the world is made of, right? So you can start to understand how the world works, see the pattern of how things move, and start to understand, the web work, the software, the program, the hardware of the world and your universe, and how you work as well. And then you can so that's divination. Then you can start to, the sorcery aspect, you can start to learn to code. So you can start to weave your code and change the world and change things in the world and change yourself as well. So, you want to learn jiu-jitsu, for example. Maybe, you can't learn it as quickly as they do in the Matrix and just upload it, maybe one day. And that's the thing about magic, that it takes time. It's really hard work, and a lot of people think that you're just gonna magically be changed and transformed, which once you start to integrate this and like really install the software and these ideas and concepts into your body and your mind and your subconscious, your soul, weird stuff, like awesome stuff happens. Like I've had things where it just seems to happen out of nowhere, but it takes a while to get there. So some things might happen dramatically sometimes, but anyone who's really learnt a skill knows like how long. Anyone who's like really delved into martial arts, for example, and installing software into your body, into your consciousness, it takes time. And a lot of the time, like initially, it's really like grinding work. Like anyone who's done like a martial art, like kung fu, for example, initially when you're doing it, it's all these like weird tiny little movements that you're just doing repeatedly, and it's really boring, and a lot of it goes against the complete way that you would move normally, and sometimes questioning why you're even doing this stuff. It doesn't even make sense. It's just a grind. But then eventually something clicks, like your body starts to absorb concepts and starts to move in certain ways, and then plays with it in ways that you aren't even aware of. That's like that flow state, that idea when someone's really mastered their craft, that idea of flow state, how you kind of just, in your art or music or whatever it is, you just drop into that zone, and that's the real mastery of that. And that's where they talk about the 4 stages of learning something or mastering something. It's you're unconsciously incompetent, so you don't know you're bad at it. Don't know it exists, and then you're consciously incompetent, so you know about it. That you're not good at it. Yeah, but you want to start learning it, so you start to you move through that stage of being bad at it, which a lot of people just don't move through because they don't want to be bad at it, especially adults. And then you're consciously competent. You're aware that you're good at it, so you're really starting to notice you're changing and you're getting better at this skill. But then the mastery is that unconscious competence, where you just, without thinking, you just might just make this amazing music, or something might come out when you're doing martial arts or anything, your art, your skill, your zone. And that's when you've really mastered something. So this is essentially what we're doing when we're, installing this software or learning systems of magic. It's really going through that grind of integrating the concept into our own psyche, into our body, into our perspective of the world, and then we can start to use it and play with it. And that's when we can really start to, going back to the idea of the Matrix and this code, is once we start to develop ourselves, we kind of get different perspectives on what's important in life, and we may want to start changing the world outside in more of accordance of what we believe is, what we want more of in the world. And that is also a concept that, you can't really break, you can't just completely rearrange everything. You can't just rip apart the Matrix or the knots of reality. You can only kind of bend them and change them a little bit by bit, especially because you could see like nature is resistant. So you're trying to change the world, but it's like the natural world has to catch up. So you're doing all these little things, and the natural world's kind of changing gradually because it had this natural resistance. Or I won't go into like the idea of like void theory and stuff here. I've already gone long enough, but it's that, the concept that the world is what everyone believes it is. So in order to change the world, you kind of need to change people's perspectives on the world. And once you change people's perspectives on the world, then you can essentially change the world, and it can transform a bit more. So, and this leads me to another idea, and the concepts around the soul is that there's this part of the soul that carries on this idea of luck into multiple lifetimes. It carries on. You might end up in the next lifetime with more or less luck, depending on what you do in your life. And it's a similar concept to karma, but it's more so asserting your conscious will against non-conscious natural tendencies, in my perspective. And again, this is only my perspective on, the idea of this and karma or things like that, because, 5 years ago, myself was very different and knew very different things and concepts. And 5 years ahead, I'll probably look back and be like, that dude has no idea what he's talking about. But, this is my current understanding. And that's all it ever really is gonna be. My current level of understanding, which will change and evolve. But the way I see karma for existence, or what people perceive as karma, is more, ethics. And it comes down to what that person's ethics is. And then their ethics comes down to the idea of, what paradigm are they operating within? What belief system have they grown up with or adapted to? So there's that old example of, say you've got one person who's about to kill 10 people. And you have the opportunity to kill that one person to save the 10. What's the right and wrong thing to do? Now, in, for example, a Christian viewpoint, you might say that, killing, thou shalt not kill. Killing is wrong in general. So, black and white, killing is wrong. So if you kill that person, you're doing the wrong thing. But what about those 10 people that just died that you had the opportunity? They might have in that system beliefs that, it was, that it was meant to happen, God's will, or whatever. But in, another belief system, it might be the idea to what's better for the whole. And that's more so mine. It's what's better for the whole in general. So obviously we're self creatures. We're going to think about ourselves first and foremost. But trying to think in that where it doesn't really affect us either way, what is better for the whole? And to save those 10 people might be better. So there's other variables. I mean, you could say like, are those people good or bad? But again, it's all perspective, and that everything is relative. So it depends. It's not just black and white. It really depends on the situation. It depends who is involved, what's going on, the environment. There's so many factors to take into account. And that's where the idea of good and bad can get pretty blurry. Right. And that's when the idea of like, good and bad anything, good and bad magic, benevolent, malevolent, all that sort of stuff gets really blurry. Where in the Germanic system of the soul, and the idea of luck, or Hamingia, or Orlog, as they call it, is more so the idea of consciousness over non-consciousness. So the idea of really, it could be like getting up early in the morning and going for that run, or, eating healthily, or, doing yoga, or trying to break that habit, or something like that, going against the grain of going against your natural tendencies. Because, biologically, we have a tendency to just do what we've always done. As long as we can, we've got somewhere to eat, somewhere to sleep, and somewhere to have sex, somewhere to procreate, we're generally fine, we're comfortable. But there's no real growth out of that. So, some people might disagree in the idea that we're not, design engineered to make art. Like, in a way we kind of are, because we can do it, but that comes later after we're comfortable. We have our basic needs, and a lot of time once we have our basic needs, we just want stuff to entertain us, so we can just like live a comfortable life and not think about anything too much. That's what most people do, and it's not just some people. So and a lot of people who are into this stuff, magic, we fall back into that. We fall like asleep, you could say. And it's not just like once you're woke, you're woke. It's all about keeping that flame lit. Like keeping that awareness lit. And like a way to do that is to set things throughout your life that will keep you awake, keep you aware, put yourself into uncomfortable situations, to share this with other people, who will then share it with other people, who will end up sharing it back with you. The idea of sharing that flame of consciousness. And yeah, there's this part of your soul that, when you just like, you start putting things into place, and you start doing things like ticking things off your to-do list, and then you get this done, you just start building momentum, and then just things just start to click into place, and it's like magic. You know what I mean? And it creates that. That's the idea of I understand it, luck, and that can carry on to multiple lifetimes, and it's really getting your stuff done. But it might have that flip side effect that once you develop too much luck, everything's easy and you get comfortable and lazy, and then you end up going back to losing your luck again. So I suppose everything has to balance out. So there's so much more to soul lore that I don't understand yet, still learning about, that I will definitely be talking about more, that I just can't delve into here because it's a whole subject on itself. So there will be lots more coming, and it's been a good first podcast, I hope. And so another thing that I want to do with this podcast is just to connect with other people who are interested in these concepts, who have dabbled in this before, really taken it further, or that have conflicting ideas, and opinions to me. So get in touch. So runeyoga.org is the portal that you can, contact me, see more of what I'm doing, get my books, come to workshops, come to classes, on any of that sort of stuff. So runeyoga.org. And I'd love to hear from you. So get in touch with me. And I'd love to leave you with coming back to that concept of runa that I talked about, and the phrase that Edred Thorson spoke that really sums up his philosophy, the idea of the runes in general, and really is part of my philosophy of how I've developed into who I am and how I see the world. And it's Rune to Runa, and it's Old Norse, and it means seek to the mysteries. So seek the mysteries, or seek towards the mysteries. So the idea of chasing that, mystery over the horizon that you may never reach, but is always going to keep pulling you on. It's that fun of the chase and that treasure hunt. And so really excited about doing more of this and hearing from you all. Thank you so much for listening up to this point. It's been a long first podcast, and excited to share more. So until next time, Rune to Runa.